everybody. It must be time for school again. Here I am, Mr. Sunday, ready to teach you some more stuff about world history. Well, it's a pity that we have to end the school year this way, where we can't get together every day, but I've got some ideas on how we can learn some more world history for the rest of this year. So let's get started, okay? Okay, the last time we were together, we were talking about Queen Elizabeth I of England. And we also know that she was known as the Virgin Queen. So we got a problem. She has no kids. Who's going to rule England after she's gone? Well, to answer that question, we have to go back a little bit. So, Queen Elizabeth I was the daughter of King Henry VIII. Remember him? He had 6 wives. Remember that? Well, Henry had a sister named Margaret. Right here. That was his sis. Margaret was lucky enough to get married to the King of Scotland, and his name was King James IV of Scotland. Margaret and James got busy, and they together had a son that they named, guess what? James V of Scotland. And so he became the next king of Scotland. James V, the King of Scotland, had a daughter instead of some sons, and he gave the throne to her. Her name was Mary. When Mary became a teenager, she fell in love with a man named Henry Stuart. He was also known as Lord Darnley. She felt pretty in love with this guy, but after they got married, she realized that he only wanted to have the throne of Scotland. But he couldn't be the King of Scotland. She could announce him as being King of Scotland, but she wasn't going to do it when she found out how greedy and how treacherous he was. So she kind of lost her love for her husband. Even though they weren't very in love with each other, they knew they had to get busy and have some kids. So they had a child together that was named James, of course, and he will be the next King of Scotland. But Mary decided she had to get rid of her husband somehow. So she started to put together a plan. So one night, when Lord Darnley was asleep in one of their castles in Scotland, Mary had some accomplices place 2 kegs of gunpowder in the room directly below Lord Darnley's room. In the middle of the night, there was a great explosion, and everyone ran to see what was happening. Mary was nowhere around. But they found Lord Darnley laying in the front lawn of the castle, dead as a doornail, without a mark on his body. Even though there wasn't much evidence pointing towards Mary, she was their leading suspect in this crime. They figured that Darnley had either been suffocated or strangled to death, but he was out of the picture. The people of Scotland immediately threw their queen in jail until they could figure out what happened, and they made the 2-year-old James VI the new King of Scotland. Now here's where it gets interesting. Mary, with the help of her new lover named Bothwell, escaped from Scotland's prison, and she fled all the way to England so she could be with her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I of England. It didn't take long for Elizabeth to uncover a lot of dirty secrets about her cousin Mary. She found out through some letters that she had uncovered from Mary that Mary was having another plot, and this plot was to eliminate Elizabeth, and that way she could become the Queen of England and the Queen of Scotland at the same time. After a lengthy trial, Elizabeth was convinced that she had enough evidence that Mary was indeed involved with a plot to overthrow Elizabeth. So she did the only thing she could do. She decided it was time for her cousin to die. Mary's execution was one of the most interesting executions I ever read about, because on the day of her execution, she came dressed in this big black gown, and she went up on the riser, and the executioner was there with his black cloak over his head, ready to do the swinging. So Mary placed her head down on the chopping block. The executioner took a swing, and the first time he just managed to hit her in the back of the head instead of on her neck. Then he pulled the axe out, and while she was still wiggling on the chopping block, he swung a second time. This time, he missed her neck and hit her in the shoulder blade. Then he yanked it out yet again, and on the third chop, he finally severed her head and it hit the floor. But this is a funny thing that happened, As soon as she went limp from her body dying, a little puppy dog crawled out from underneath all of her gowns that she'd been holding the whole time to give her some comfort on her execution day. As Queen Elizabeth neared the end of her life, realizing she had no offspring to give the throne to, she decided the best thing to do would be to leave the throne to her first cousin, twice removed, the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, James VI of Scotland. So he became King James VI of Scotland, and he was also King James I of England. But now we have a new dynasty in England. The old dynasty was the Tudor dynasty from Henry VIII. Now we have a dynasty called the Stuart dynasty that shall rule England. Wow, what a story. But that's not the end of it. But that's enough for today. So tune in the next time on YouTube, and I'll tell you some more about world history.